Hey, what's up, Reefers? I owe you guys a video. I actually have filmed and edited a antibiotic dip experience video, but recently the antibiotic has been a really hot and sensitive topic. I figure I better do all my homework before I put that out there. Not so much I'm afraid of the heat. Well, I don't like the heat, but I just don't want to contribute to any potential issues. I want to be part of the solution, not so much a problem. So I figure, you know what, let me do more homework, get more expert opinion before I go ahead and release that video. So instead of locking myself into some heated online debate, I figure, you know what, let's take a step back and go back to the basics. How about we do a 145-gallon tank full update? I have absolutely not talked about the AI blade as well. I'm trying to wait until I hit the half-year mark, which is coming up next month, before I give my opinion. But so far, as you can see, Coral seems to be liking him. So today, this update, I'm going to divide up into different sections. First, let's talk about soft coral, and then we're going to talk about LPS, and then we're going to talk about SPS, and then we're going to talk about the fish, as well as some of the inverts, for example, like the Colorado sunburst anemone, which kind of looks like just a regular good old rose anemone, but it is a Colorado sunburst. And finally, I also want to talk a little bit about my regimen in terms of maintaining this tank, in terms of how if I do water change, and also what am I dosing in this tank, because that's one of the kind of like a hot topic a while back as well, like what method do you do? And as a bonus, I also picked up this fun little thing thanks to my Reef Sensei Telegrams notes, and I'll tell you exactly what this is in a little bit. Before you jump right in, let me just give you kind of like a general sense of how the parameters of this tank is. For alkalinity, it's usually around 9.5. I'm trying to bump it up to 10, but usually it sits around 9.5. Calcium, I'm not sure. I think each time I do ICP, it always sits around like 440, which is a little bit high. Magnesium, usually 1400, but again, I don't test for calcium and magnesium regularly. Usually just every 2 or 3 months ICP come back and I'll get the reading on calcium, magnesium. Nutrient wise, this tank has always been kind of nutrient rich. The phosphate level recently, it's 0.12 if I remember correctly. Usually this tank fluctuates between 0.12 to 0.16. For nitrate, in the past it has been sitting about 20 to 30, but recently it has been dropping. Right now I believe it's 3.5 based on the HANA high range nitrate checker, and it was also confirmed by ICP, so I think the nitrate has been dropping. Probably due to the refugium. Look at the macroalgae just straight up taking off. But anyways, we can talk a little bit more about how I manage nutrients and what I've been attempting as well. Alright, let's talk about some soft corals, eh? Right off the bat, I am absolutely in love with the jawbreaker mushroom. These are my all-time favorite soft corals, which is kind of weird, right? Mushroom. But if you look in the back, that big chunk right there, that big piece is actually the original jawbreaker mushroom that I got. And in the back, I also got some other jawbreaker that I got from Daniel when he was tearing down the tank. And once in a while, they would spit off a baby. It would just kind of float off like this. Right after the jawbreaker, of course, we have to talk about the whipping willows. Now, the top one right here, this is the Palma Llama's whipping willow. Same thing down here. Interesting thing is that the frag actually develops longer tentacle than the original colony right there. But they are growing well, they're recovering well, they seem to frag really well and also heals up well and attach well. Just really, really enjoyable coral to frag and share. In the back, the green one right there is the Reef Raft Canada whipping willow that I got from Rap Frog from Canada in the recent video. Basically, I drove up to Toronto and traded coral. If you have not watched that video, basically I brought a frag of the Bahama Llama's whipping willow up to Toronto through car and declared it through custom, and I brought back a Japanese whipping willow from Rap Frog, who has a fantastic collection of soft corals. And right next to it, it's another morph of whipping willow that Lynn hooked me up with because the tentacle never quite developed for her in her tank, so she gave me a frag to see if it will look a little different in my tank as well. I do believe that is from the Coral Nursery, so that's a whipping willow from them as well. And also from Lynn, since we're talking about whipping willow, here I believe is also a type of Japanese whipping willow. I was chatting with Aqua Splenda. He thought that this one may be the same morph as the green one I brought back from Canada. So we will see as they grow a little bit older to see whether they are the same or are in fact different ones. Now in terms of soft corals, I also have a soft spot for these I guess more unique type. For example, look at this purple branch one with bright neon green polyps. I have not seen this besides this year. I think this year it started popping up. It may have been a hobby already, but I just never encountered it. Absolutely love it. And over here, it looks like one of those Keijawada Japanese Nethias, but it is in fact white in coloration, not so much a pink, so it is something different. And lastly, in terms of soft coral, of course, we gotta talk a little bit about the zoas. Right now, certain morph seems to be dominating my zoa garden, so it's not too much variety right now. My biggest loss is probably the GMK. That's a Grandmaster Kraken. Absolutely love those zoas, but each time I'll just find Asterina starfish kind of just engulfing one of the polyp, and the next day it'll be gone. I don't think the starfish is legit eating the polyp per se, but I do think that maybe the starfish is trying to eat stuff off of the polyp, like microalgae or bacteria, and the digestive enzyme that the starfish uses probably melted the polyp as well, unfortunately. We also got to talk about this, huh? These are rainbow clove corals. If you have these, make sure you keep them on a separate island, because these guys are absolutely super invasive. I used them to line the wall. Some of them did happen to drift off to the rockwork. It was a pain to kind of just pull them out. So just kind of like a PSA. If you have these Xenia, just keep them on their own island. They'll look absolutely beautiful, but they grow so fast. One thing I'm doing here is actually inserting blank frag plug within this is actually a frag rack, right? I have frag plug here, so the idea is that when the polyp grows under the plug, I can just pull the plug out and just give them away. In terms of soft coral, I also got this gem right here from Rap Frog when I visited Toronto. This is a Palau Nymphaeus. It's basically a nice neon green Nymphaeus, and it is a fresh cut. That's why I have it inside this plant mesh pots. This is a nice little budget hack as well. This whole setup, a mesh pot with a 2-inch frag disc inside, costs $2. If you calculate it out, because you have to buy these in bulk. I have a link in the video description below if you're interested. I feel like this is a really nice alternative to the classic mushroom box that you have up here, which looks really nice and you keep the sandbed clear. But for me, this has a lot of more water flow going through, which I much preferred. And this fantastic money-saving tip comes from Bay Area Reef. His Instagram will be here. Also, a coral that I have not talked about, because I did not release the last video, is the Fiji yellow leather. This is one frag of it. We have a larger frag in the back, and I also have two right there on the same bed. I have not talked about it because I talked about them extensively in the video that I don't think I'll be releasing about antibiotic dips, because I dipped them and they absolutely helped because they were decaying after cutting. These guys, I plan to give maybe 2 or 3 of these frags away. I have the model colony in the mangrove tank, and I have that chunk right there. My goal with them is to see if the green spectrum will actually turn the coral back to a canary yellow. Supposedly it may be tough with LED simply because we don't have enough green in the spectrum, but hey, never know until you try. So here we go. Before we move on to the LPS, last bit about soft coral. You notice that in the back, I have a wall full of green star polyp. Down here, also green star polyp. These are 2 different types of green star polyps. Because if you look at the one in the back, that actually came from my drop-off tank days. It's super neon green. I've never seen a green star polyp with this much neon in it. But it also has that nice bright white center, which by itself, it stands out really nicely. And if you look down here, I'm not 100% sure if this is the branching type of green star polyp, because I do have that in this tank. I do see that it forms like little tubes coming out, so it may be that. But you notice that besides the nice green tentacles or polyps, it does not have that green center. So if you're thinking about using green star polyps to kind of line the bottom of the tank, which I did in the past with the drop-off tank, and I may do again in the future, that's something to be considered as well. Because if you want the grass field effect, I think green star polyp like this without the white center works a lot better. I had that before, so I feel like that little white center kind of breaks the illusion of a grass field, if that's what you're going for. Oh, perfect timing. We can talk about fish this way. Every day, 3 times a day for a minute each time, the auto feeder is gonna run, and it's gonna drop some freeze-dried mysis as well as some like fish flake into the tank, and you see all the fish lined up. And this is usually when I can really easily count all the fish. Actually, you know what? Interesting. I do not see the Vanguard cardinals. Let me just swing back here real quick. Usually they're just kind of tucked away. Not here too. Where are you guys? Bangais. Where are the Bengal cardinals? Oh, there they are. Look at them. They have been kind of elusive. I think it's spawning time. And I think, has it transferred? No, they haven't transferred yet. So yeah, I think it's almost spawning time. They've been spawning regularly in this tank, and each time the male would hold the eggs in his mouth for a couple days, and then eventually it never comes to term. Usually about 3 or 4 days in, and we'll see the male eating again. It's like, oh, that was that. Fish-wise, we got 6 lyre-tailed amphias. They have all grown. I was not expecting all 6 to make it, if I may be honest. That's why I got 6. They have all grown, and man, it's a tough choice. I was like, do I want to keep all 6 of these fish? The reason I'm saying this is because I would much prefer the bioload to be budgeted for some utility fish. For example, I have 2 tanks that can pick at algae, but I would like a fish that will scrape algae. So I was thinking about the Tamino tank. At the same time, with this bioload, I may have to go for algae blenny. Because you see, I start seeing some film algae appearing on the rockwork where the SPS corals has been cleared out. So for the most part, the lyre-tailed amphia just looks pretty for this tank and does not really serve a purpose, which for a tank my size, 145 or 135 is not that large. So it's, we'll see, I'm eyeballing them, whether I should rehome 1 or 2 of those guys. The tanks are doing well. The blue tang or the hippo tang, it's kind of getting to a size where I'm like, okay, if he gets 1 inch larger, I probably want to rehome him to a 6-foot tank. This is a 4-foot tank where it'll be a little more comfortable, but so far it's okay. Yellow tang has been a model citizen and looking really, really pretty. The Melanaris wrasse, it's doing a good job picking at things because like every time I move a piece of rock, it'll just follow me around trying to pick at whatever I lifted up. But at the same time, it did not really do much when it comes to the Euphyllia flatworms. So I don't know. I wonder if different types of wrasse would do a better job, but then again, whatever I read online always recommended Melanaris wrasse. This guy's color is getting more and more vibrant each day, which is awesome. I guess it's turning into a male. I don't think it's a super male or anything like that, but it is a pretty fish. It is getting a little bit large as well, so it's definitely contributing to the bioload too. And oddly enough, this is probably one of the most personable fish in my tank right now. This is a yellow line goby. This fish has been with me for a long time. I thought these little Leon goby only lived for like 1.5 years, but I feel like he has been with me for a long time. It's always just there. It's always just there, front and center. Wherever I am, just kind of follow me, and it likes to perch on the there is a clam, so it is quite a character. I would like to add 1 or 2 more gobies. Speaking of gobies, there's actually a couple other gobies in this tank, but because they're so reclusive that we don't really see often. First, we have a white line goby. I'll try to get a shot of him if I ever catch him out. And then we also have 2 upside down goby that they are super, super secretive. They're a little bit better, but each time I see them, it is a treat because it's so beautiful. Really striking white and black coloration. I think one moved down there and one is usually down under the artwork. Let me see if I see him. I don't see him there, so it looks like we're out of luck today. So one more reason that I potentially want to rehome this hippo tang besides the size is that hippo tang, even though they're supposedly reef safe, has a reputation that once they get to a certain size, they will nip at meaty corals, meaning your LPS. I have not seen that yet, but I have not kept a hippo tang any larger than this up to this point, so we will see. But I feel like this is not going to be its forever home, even simply due to the tank size, which I'll really miss. This is absolutely beautiful and such an iconic fish, and I had it since a tiny baby. Next up, let's take a look at the LPS. Let's start off with the Euphyllia torches. A couple of videos ago, you saw that I have encounters with Euphyllia eating flatworms. I am happy to report that I've been dipping it for 2 months straight. No other flatworms has been found ever since the first 2 rounds, so I think we are probably in the clear. But once in a while, I'll probably still dip them just in case. You see like little scrunched up, unextended head like this, but usually it's either pests or usually, hopefully, it's splitting. Whenever I see cases like that, if that does not go back to normal, I'll just dip it just to be safe. I've also spot dipped some of the hammer and frog spawn, and nothing suspicious came out, so that is a good news. So I think for the most part, the Euphyllia eating flatworm episode is behind us. In terms of the gold torch, I have 2 clusters of New York Nicks. These came from Joker corals about 2.5 years ago, and they grew from 1 head to all of these. I gave some away already. In the front, this is probably one of my favorite gold torch. This is called the Sun Guard gold torch that came from Drop Off Coral, and I purchased this during a charity auction for Mr. Jake Adams. And this is really nice and gold. Usually with the Indo gold, you see, for example, this is Indo gold. You see the gold at the tip, and it turns into like a pink or tan at the bottom of the tentacles. But this one, it just gold through and through, almost like Australian gold torch. So I really like this. In the back here, I have what's known as a Holy Grail gold torch, and this came from Lynn, Reef Nerd Aquatics. In her setup, which is a little bit more blue, this coral is absolutely gold with a hint of green, versus in my tank, it's more of a green with a hint of gold, which is still a nice color combo. Speaking of Euphyllias, hammers and frog spawn has been reclassified out of Euphyllias, so they're their own thing now. But here is a garden, I still call it the Euphylia garden, that I have been building. And the corals back there are doing good. My hope is that that whole area, all the way up the wall, it's just gonna be Euphylia garden, well, not Euphyllias, frog spawn hammer, because they can touch. Same thing over here. In the back, eventually I would like a garden similar to that over there as well. Now let's zoom in a little bit and look at these. I have different varieties. Two of the hammer of notes that I'm paying special attention to is here. This is the Prince of Darkness from ACI. It's a pretty recent release. And up there is the King hammer, also from ACI Aquaculture. They're a little bit further back, so it's a little bit more difficult to see. But here I can bring it closer to the King. The King one is absolutely gorgeous. And right there is the Prince of Darkness. Prince of Darkness is supposed to be like a almost like black in coloration, but as you can see, one of the polyp in the middle is taking on some green coloration, probably from that green hammer right there. And in case you're wondering, that is a wild rainbow gold hammer that came from Reef Nerd Aquatics as well. I have a lot of corals from it. Continuing the LPS tour, Garnipora definitely took center stage of this tank. Let me step back. For whatever reason, they just grow really nicely for me in this tank, especially the pink and red variety, which is this and this. I have other Garniporas like these. I don't even know the name of these guys, and also I have there's another one back there. I actually gave away two chunks, one green Garnipora and then a army green Avipora to Lynn to probably chop up and sell on her site. But because they just simply take up too much room. At some point, I want to try moving that gigantic pink to maybe back there to serve as like a moving background. That would be cool. But I'm not sure how that's going to play out, simply because, let me back up a little bit. That pink Gani, once it's happy, it gets pretty big. And the one in the front, the red one in the front, is kind of getting up there in size as well. So I think at some point, I probably need to ask for Lynn's help to use a table saw or a coral saw and just kind of slice it up and make it a little bit smaller. But Garnipora jams of this tank. Another classic LPS is of course the Space Invader Pectinia. For whatever reason right now, it decided that it wants to be deflated. Usually it's really puffy, and down there's actually exact same one. Look at the formation of how they grow. Due to the difference in the amount of light and more likely the flow, they have different pattern. One is a little bit more like reaching up like this, versus at the bottom, that one's plating out. I also have another frag of the Space Invader Pectinia. This is what I call like F2? Actually, no, this is F1. This is the very original Space Invader Pectinia that I got a long time ago that Jim took in when it was dying. And when Jim was having tank issue, he brought that chunk back and I chopped it up, gave most of them to Lynn, and I saved, I think, 2 pieces. This is one of them. Speaking of Jim, this elegance right here also came from Jim. So I also gave my old elegance to Jim. I forgot it was not doing well, or maybe outgrew the tank, the 45 gallon cube tank, but he has it. And at some point it actually dropped a polyp naturally onto the sand bed. If you look here, you see a really small skeleton right here. Jim gave it to me, and elegance coral has a really potent sting, and that's why I have it all the way in the corner, and it seems to like the corner. And elegance coral, I believe, came from like muddy area, a lot of mud, a lot of sand, so it likes to be on the bottom. So that area seems to fit him well, and he cannot sting out of things. So it's there stayed for almost a year and a half now, but check out the size of this. And it all came out in a tiny little skeleton right here, and this is a natural born in captivity. And the last LPS I want to share with you guys is this. This is the Leon Candy Cane corals. I mean, go by different names too, like trumpet corals, etc. But I only had a couple heads couple months ago, and then it was doing well, and it started multiplying. And once they get going, they get going. My goal is to have this area all surrounded with these neon green candy king, and I actually love them because if you step back, it is one of the brightest coral in this tank. And these are the good old neon candy king coral. And you see I used the Monty cap. This is the National Aquarium green Monty cap as a shelf, simply because I don't really know where to put it. I have a cluster and that plate just seems to fit. I just jam it in. And the Monty cap is growing so fast for me that I just use them for shelf these days. I also noticed that I have some bare rocks, so instead of filling them all up with zoas, I've decided to try something a little different. For example, Favier's or Mace brains. So look at this. We got some of these guys right here. We got some, I think is that jelly beans or something. I'm not too well versed with certain names, but I just want them to kind of encrust onto the rock. Knowing this, my Reef Sensei Jim also hooked me up with one of his treasured piece. This is a Favier with a really nice bright green eye. And I purposely asked him to cut me a smaller piece because once I get to a certain size, I want to just scoop it out of the frag plug and just like there, glue them directly on the rock. So this way when they grow, hopefully they'll kind of conform a little bit more to the rock, because again, my goal is to kind of have all the rock covered with corals, not frag plug of corals. So if you've been following this channel, you know I had a SPS wide crash. I lost, I would say maybe like 80% of the SPS I had in this tank. Luckily the green slime ball survived. The electric Miyagi tort survived. A cluster of goldenrod that was not here. I had one, my big colony was here. That bleached out. And I think that kind of just took all the other SPS down with the bacterial infection. But that cluster that was in the dark survived. And interestingly, I have some golf bonsai remnants kind of sprouting back out. So we have some SPS that survived the ordeal. Also the stuff in the back, the Master Yoda, that's a green one. And also the gold Leppo, they also survived. But I lost, I'll say 80% of the SPS. I have a really nice clusters of goldenrod that used to grow here. I used to have Magnificence here. I have a golf bonsai that's shooting off here. I have some pink nemonate that's taking off over here as well. And I have a bunch of those Forest Fire digitata, and it's absolutely a shame because at that point I was like, oh man, I was so happy. The main focus of this tank was SPS, and I was so happy that they're taking off. Unfortunately, I think this was back in late January. The crash happened, and now it's June, so it's almost half a year now, and they are bouncing back really nicely. They're bouncing back really nicely, and I think like I'm probably getting ready to frag the goldenrod soon. I'll give it maybe another month or so, then I should start being able to take frags from it again. But as you can see, color's back, and I think the SPS that made it definitely take advantage of the lack of competition for space and started spreading out. I feel so blessed that I at least have these 2 or 2.5 colonies that made it, because as you know, it took time. It definitely took time for SPS to grow into a decently sized colony, and I feel like that's kind of like the goal of this tank, to see if I can successfully keep SPS to maturity, versus in the past I'll have the SPS grow a little bit and then upswing will happen and then it'll die and I have to start over. Here's the green slime ball. Interesting thing about this coral is that it's actually growing over the dead area. The dead area is like, looks like all red with some turf algae on it, but the SPS is actually growing over it, which is awesome. The Miyagi torts, it went through a little growth spurt. Although color-wise it does not really compare to some of the other SPS that I have, but in terms of the growth formation and also the vitality of surviving that crash and also just taking off now speaks volume of this strand. I absolutely love this coral. And of course, who can forget the goldenrod? It's probably my favorite SPS in this tank. They grow fast, color is really vibrant. Not a huge fan of the growth formation because as they get big, they get into like a cluster of stuff in a volleyball size. But I mean, it does have awesome coloration to make up for it, as well as the speed of growth. What scares me a little bit about them is that they don't encrust as much, so I feel like one wrong move, then the whole colony is gonna come tumbling down, versus these Acropora, they pull out first and then they sprout, so they have a really solid base. You really have to try to pry them off, as I learned when I was removing the bleach corals. Some of the other SPS that I added thanks to our local friends, Box Reef. He has an absolutely amazing SPS tank. We got the Bill Murray that I noticed the tips are turning bright, meaning that it may be growing. And we have the firecracker. I absolutely love the coloration of this coral. Out of the 4 corals that he gifted me, I think like the firecracker is probably my favorite. I've never seen it before. And in the back, I have the goth bonsai because like from the last round, I learned that goth bonsai grow just they sprout upwards versus like outwards like these guys. So I kept them in the back thinking that they'll serve as a nice background, just go shoot straight out. And on top of that, he also sent me with a Walt Disney, which scared the crap out of me because tenuous does not have a good reputation of survival in my tank. But so far so good, so far so good. You notice that I started mounting certain SPS or corals to the back wall because I want to create depth. I want like SPS in the background, SPS in the midground, and then some SPS more like near the front. So eventually I'll probably grow something out here too, but we'll see. In terms of SPS right now, I'm just glad that I did not have to quote unquote start completely over. I still have something to be there to show people that, hey, yeah, this is still a mature tank. It's not all just like little sticks hanging out. Down at the bottom left, it's tough decision time because here is kind of like my Montiporal cap corner. If I step back a little bit, the idea is to create some of these spirals here that'll look fantastic, which I'm sure it will. But I'm starting to find that once the Monty cap grows towards the glass, they don't just end there. It starts encrusting onto the glass. For example, like this. Recently, I broke off a whole big chunk here. That's why you see something missing. You see the faded area. So I don't know. Down here may be okay, but once these guys start touching the glass, I feel like it's gonna start looking messy. So I may need to start pruning them back a little bit sooner than I'll like. But taking a closer look at the Monty cap, we have the standard red or orange Monty cap right here. We have, like I mentioned earlier, this is a green Monty cap from the National Aquarium from Baltimore. It's not a drop dead gorgeous coral, but it is a coral with history and with story. For that reason, that's a really cool coral too. Over here we have a TSA Death Spiral, I believe that's what it's called. Looks to be a red Montiporal with purple polyp, which is really cool. And over here we have a unknown Monty cap that came from, once again, my Reef Sensei Telegram. And I believe he may have gotten this from Alex way back. And this is almost like a golden or bronze Monty cap with red streaks running through it, which I thought is super unique as well. So in terms of SPS that survived the crash, here's another gem right here. Look at this guy. For the longest time, it has just sit there doing nothing until recently I see that all those ridges at the top started growing. So I feel like that may be an indicator that it is ready to take off, which I am for. I'm all for. I'm so excited for it. I think that covers most of the corals. If you have any questions regarding any of these corals or interest in frags, just let me know. Right now, I'm still mainly giving away, trading, and selling locally. Not so much shipping yet. When I do need to ship, I lean heavily on Lynn, the Reef Nerd Aquatics. So if you happen to be buying something from her and want something from my tank, just let me know. We can probably work something out with her where she can help ship some of the stuff out as well. But let's talk a little bit about fish and inverts. First up, look at this guy. The Doresa clam is still alive and well, and I believe it grew. I'm not 100% sure because like I look at it every single day. So even if it grew, I have no idea. But let me back up a little bit to get a sense of scale. I think it grew a little bit, maybe a little bit. I'm a huge sucker for clams, if you don't know already. I love clams. I want to add more clams to this tank, but I'm scared. Because if you don't remember, early on in the life of this tank, maybe a year and a half ago, added a couple Maxima clams, Doresa clams. No good ending. They all lasted at most a couple weeks and then they just died for apparent no reason. But later on, I think I may have an idea of what may have happened. Because around that time, I was also fighting bubble algae. And one of the things that I was fighting bubble algae with was Vibrant. And if you remember last year, it was a year and a half ago, there's a whole fiasco about what Vibrant really is. And turns out it's an algicides. More specifically, it does not play well with mollusk. Is that how you pronounce it? Mollusk? I know how to spell it, I can't pronounce it. So that explains a lot. Thinking back, I was like, dude, that's about the same period of time that I was losing clam, that I was fighting bubble algae as well. There could be other reasons, but I feel like that may be it. And after this long, I wonder if it's still in the system. But the fact that the rest of the clam has done so well for so long already, I'm hopeful. So I think it may be high time that I try clam again. We'll see. But yeah, I love clam. Eventually, I would love to have a Giga clam and also a blue squamosas, but who doesn't, right? Next, let's talk about the Colorado sunburst anemone. It has grown really well. For a couple months, I wasn't sure of its place. It would show up one place and a week later a different place, but I think for now, that's where it's gonna stay. It stayed there for about a month and a half already, so I think it's happy, and it has really taken over the spot. As per usual, bubble tip anemone shoved its foot under a crevice and then reached down and out. Seeing the position of this anemone and the size of this anemone now, almost make me wanna add clowns back to this tank. And I have sad news to share here. One of the male clowns passed away. It was the oddest thing. Everything was going really well. They were actually shaking each other. I feel like they were getting ready to spawn. And then one day I just found the male clown stuck to the power head. It was the most random and heartbreaking things. So right now in the mangrove tank, we only have the female clown. It's just still living large, living well, still begging for food all the time. I really don't know what happens. It's almost like she just turned Black Widow because the male clown's body seems fat, seems healthy. The only thing just is stuck to the power heads, and that was it. Normally, seeing how strong they are, it just doesn't make sense. They would not get caught in any power heads. But we'll talk a little bit more about it when we talk about the mangrove tank. Yeah, just seeing this anemone, I was like, oh man, it would be cool to have a clownfish in this tank again. But the reason I moved the clownfish out was because they were pestering the hammers, the frog spawn way too much to the point that it's causing distress. So I moved them. And I figure in a isolated tank they can focus on spawning, but disaster struck. So rest in peace, little buddy. Back to the anemone. This is a Colorado sunburst anemone from Thirsty Reef from Instagram. I got it for a really good price, thank you. And right now it is in the red phase. When it first got here, it was in gold phase. That thing was, it looks like this. It was absolutely glowing. But with a better positioning, right under the lights, I hope that maybe it'll go back to the gold phase, even though the red phase also beautiful. So that is the sunburst anemone. Really quickly, let's talk about the maintenance of this tank. I do not do regular water change. I rely on dosing trace elements as supplements, and I only do water change when something is obviously wrong. My main source of dosing is kalkwasser. I run through a 5-gallon jug every, I'll say 3 or 4 days at this point. In the past, before the SPS crash, I had to do kalkwasser and 2 parts simply because the amount of kalkwasser I would need to dose already outpaced the evaporation. But right now, it's still slowly building up to it since we lost all those SPS corals. And to dose this, I'm using this guy, Kamor, I think XP Pro T1, blah, 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 something like that. The reason I use this is because it can do continuous dosing, and I only dose kalkwasser in the afternoon throughout the night to try to even out the pH. In terms of dosing trace elements, I lean heavily on the Reef Moonshiner methods, and I have seen great results. ever since I started. That's why I kept it going. The elements themselves is affordable. What's not affordable is the almost constant ICP test that you have to do every 2 or 3 months. I do them every 3 or 4 months now. I stretch them out a little bit since it seems to be pretty stable. But in the beginning, you're supposed to do it every month for a couple months, and then you kind of stretch it out a little bit. So ICP is actually the part that's a little bit more expensive. So I do daily dosings. I think I daily dose maybe 4 or 5 elements, and then after each ICP test every 3 months, I'll do a big correction for some of the other stuff like fluorides. I also dose liquid mud. This is like a combo of different type of trace elements. I also dose their vitamin carb X. Honestly, I don't really know if these two does too much. It's hard to quantify, but these guys, I can see the actual results from the ICP test. So aside from these, I have also been doing Acto Balance from Tropic Marin. Before, when I was trying to bring down the phosphate and nitrate, I was doing this MP Eliminate or something like that, and I've since switched over to this. Whether this actually works or not is hard for me to tell, but it's not too expensive. It makes me feel good, and I trust the company and the people behind it to do the right thing. So I figure I just kept it up, and I guess so far so good. Did not do any harm that I know of. So I kept it going. For feeding the corals and fish, the main source of food is bentipeds. These are mainly for the fish. I basically do a scoop like this, one time in the morning, one time in the afternoon, and just stick it in there and swirl it, and you see all the fish go crazy, and a lot of them just fall into the torch corals. And I feel like that's why the torches are growing so fast here. And I also do a TDO chroma boost. I load them up in this fancy little gadget right here. Here, let me show you. Boom. I just drop some here. And the fish usually just come up and just go crazy. But I think I'm over there with the camera, so they're freaking out a little bit. Look at that. All my fish eat pellets. All my fish eat flakes. Even the Bengal cardinals and even the Lyotell amphias. And people are like, how do you do that? I don't know. They just do. Okay, I think the blue light is about to kick on, and it is about time for me to go pick up my kids. So I think we're gonna say sayonara right here. If you have watched this video all the way up to this point, thank you. I appreciate you. You are indeed one of the hardcore reef squats. Or maybe you just skip to this part. I don't know. I don't care, man. I just hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions regarding anything we talked about, any certain things that you want to know more about, or any question you want to ask, just drop in the comments. I'll be happy to reply to you, or maybe use it as almost like a talking prompt for one of the future video. Dude, anything you point to, anything you talk about, I can probably talk for at least half an hour. Man, I talk a lot. Maybe that's why I'm a YouTuber, huh?